Joyce.
What? What's wrong, Harvey? What are you doing up? What is it?
Tell me the truth. Am I a guy who writes about himself in a comic book? Or am I just a character in that book?
What are you talking about? What are you saying?
If I die, will that character keep going? Or will he just fade away?
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar, that's me.
And me.
And this week we are talking about American Splendor from 2003. Pause the podcast.
Every week it's a surprise.
There's literally no spoilers.
No, you don't need to pause the podcast, no.
I guess
There is technically narrative.
There's a narrative, but Harvey Pekar was a public figure, so, like, I could say, spoiler,
Can you spoil?
He gets cancer and then he survives it. But that's a matter of public record. It's not fiction.
I mean,
so
yeah, it's like when we did Rose of Versailles, pause the podcast, because you know what's going to happen in the French Revolution?
Yeah, no.
No, don't pause the podcast.
Okay, I got to lay out a bit of a preamble.
Fantastic. Yep, I'll settle in.
I had originally, before we ever recorded our first episode and this podcast was just a gleam in my eye, had thought, okay, there's going to be like 100 episodes or maybe, and then it grew to 250. Now it's grown to like 500. But I was like...
This is news to me.
I was thinking like, oh, okay. I said American Splendor has to be last. And the reason why is that I had a bias. I was pre-biased because I had seen it. And I was like, in terms of adaptation, it's never going to be beat. Nothing else is going to come close to the twisty, clever things that this movie does in terms of adaptation. So we'll do this one last. And then we ended up doing Fritz for some reason.
Yes, we did.
And I always thought, okay, we'll do Fritz and then we'll do American Splendor. I can't remember why we moved Fritz ahead. Maybe it's because we're on an accelerated schedule, or I don't remember what it was. But already, even before that, I was starting to dread coming to this episode. Because I was like, this is an amazing comic. This is such an amazing movie. I can't wait to talk about it. And, 10, 20, 30 episodes in, I was like,
Jordan's
going to hate this comic. He's going to hate this movie. He's going to say it's a bad adaptation. I'm just like, I'm going to have to be in here defending it for 90 minutes. And my heart was sinking. And I was like, okay.
And everyone's thrilled to hear this.
All right. We'll just move it earlier. Rip that Band-Aid off.
Good.
Rather than be precious about it.
Hundreds of episodes.
And save it to the end to have our finale be you talking about how much you dislike this comic in this movie.
Good. I should have guessed.
So that's the preamble. Now, let's talk about American Splendor. American Splendor is a comic book like none other. Harvey Pekar was a file clerk. I think he was born in 1939. And he was a file clerk until he retired. He was offered many promotions, but he refused them.
Yeah, I read that too.
I think he found a work-life art balance in there that he was probably happy to stick with, or maybe it was just something about his personality. He was like, I don't want to have more responsibility and move up this ladder, or, be really stuck. Anyway, that's all besides the point. He met Robert Crumb. They were living in the same neighborhood in the 60s.
Late 60s, I think, yeah.
Late 60s. And he was a voracious record collector. Also wrote about records. He wrote reviews, hundreds of reviews for magazines, newspapers, whatever.
Yes.
About jazz records. And also he wrote liner notes for albums and stuff like that.
He has this reputation as being like a blue-collar savant.
Yeah.
Like someone that just kind of wrote comics, produced comics sort of from nowhere. Ex nihilo, but actually he was an educated man.
Yes. He dropped out after 2 terms or 2 semesters according to the movie.
Well, it depends how you define. He was well read.
Yeah. Yes.
He dropped out of what Americans call college, university, after 2 years because he didn't want to complete a mathematics subject.
Yes.
But he was extraordinarily well read and published a lot, as you said, in a lot of in newspapers and magazines on various subjects, but typically or frequently to do with music.
Yes, and he was an astute writer, and he wrote about comics as well, especially later on. He's one of the only guys that really took on Mouse in a negative way.
Yeah, I read that too, yeah. That's ballsy. You have to be careful when you're just criticising anything to do with Mouse.
So he had hooked up with Crumb through record collecting, but then he became interested in comics, or he was already interested in comics. He collected comics as a kid.
That's it, yes. He was. I read that he liked comics very much as a kid, but grew tired of the formulaic plot, formulaic and repetitive stories.
Yes.
Brilliantly represented in the film with him refusing to dress up as a superhero at Halloween.
Yes. I actually watched the DVD with commentary.
Yes.
And they made the scene up for the movie, but they asked him about it. He said he probably did.
I figured
go
it was
around
probably
without,
made up because it was too perfect.
but he said he wanted the swag. So he would have gone around without a costume. He couldn't quite remember.
I mean, I have no trouble. I was pretty sure it was made up, but also I have no trouble believing it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay, so after he meets Crumb, he kind of gets interested in making his own comics. He starts with a one-pager with Crumb draws and appears on the back of one of Crumb's self-published comics. And then he has about 4 or 5 other little short stories appear here and there. I think they were drawn by different people. Finally, in around 75, 76, he decides he's going to put out his own comic book. And it's called American Splendor. It's about 50 pages an issue. It comes out once a year. He quits record collecting so he can save enough money. He just repurposes that money he was spending on records into publishing this comic book.
He never had any money or enough money.
No.
And he poured it all into record collecting and then eventually into comic distributing. One of his comics deals with he would hustle records at work. So he was working. All he ever did was work as a file clerk for like 37 years or something like that. And he would get out a trolley and trundle around the hospital selling records that he'd picked up on the cheap that he didn't want in order to pay for the ones he did want.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds very prosaic, but I mean, he has this knack of in his comics of making all of these quotidian events interesting.
Exactly. So it's prosaic is the word. It's prosaic, mundane. It is the stuff that would get cut out of other media. Or, I would actually say you cannot do these stories in any other medium. He kind of figured out. You cannot... Sometimes it's like a one-pager that's just a conversation with somebody.
I've jumped ahead a bit. All right, so he puts out American Splendor, and what typifies his body of work is kind of short, 5-6 pages, sometimes less.
Sometimes a page.
And generally it will be sardonic, kind of little tales about an interaction that he's had, a conversation he's overheard, an aspect of his life which he finds tiresome or noteworthy.
Yeah.
And he has a style where he imbues it with... How to put it?
The accents, the dialects, or... I'm not sure. It's interesting because he does his own voice. Now, I've never seen any other author phoneticize their own dialogue.
Yes.
Usually if a person's...
Well, you don't have an accent, do you, when you speak?
No.
It's other people that have accents.
Exactly. It's like...
But he writes in I guess it's Cleveland...
Well,
Ohio.
yeah, so when he says something, it's SUMP''N, something. That's how he writes his own dialogue. Now, his first language is Yiddish. English was actually his second language, so
That's extraordinary.
He's kind of coming at this... He can hear his own dialogue. Like, he can hear the words that are coming out of his own mouth, I guess. But he captures everybody's voices really in a way that that's what it is. Because sometimes you just get a page of a conversation with two people. There's not even a punchline. It doesn't go anywhere. It just ends.
Yeah.
It just ends like a brick hitting the ground. But you're in there listening to these people like they're real people. And they are. They're the people he works with or people he met dealing records or whatever. Or just somebody saw at the grocery store. It could be anything.
The thing, this might be familiar to people of a certain age. Because it sounds a bit like blogging. Right? So,
Well, I was thinking about that because I was thinking about you couldn't. I was thinking you can't do a song about this. I was thinking you can't do a movie about it. Was something I thought about. I was thinking you can't do...
About blogging?
You can't do prose about these kinds of stories that he's writing about. You can't do really a prose story. I was like, could you even tweet? Could you even tweet that this guy said this thing and that thing and there's not even anything funny about it? It's just the way he said it and the way that Pekar transcribes the dialogue as it sounds in his ears.
yes. I think I agree to a point. I think these are singular kind of works. Absolutely. And I couldn't imagine them in another medium. He's always... It's really something. They'll pretty much all start the same way, which is him aggressively staring at you.
Sometimes, but if it's not a conversation, he will be staring at you. And in fact, Crumb describes it as haranguing the reader.
Yes. Yes. And he always looks... Different authors have drawn him... different artists have drawn him differently. But generally, he looks hideous.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can see him. He's looking dead at you, and he'll be and he'll introduce the story he's about to tell you as though he's doing it in conversation. Now, you can talk about. It reminds me a little bit of newspaper or certain types of newspaper or magazine columns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where a columnist will write about things like this.
Yeah.
So this sort of, or to a lesser extent, like nowadays, which is something we're very familiar with, like blogging or vlogging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Vlogging especially. So people might...
Oh, TikTok.
Yeah, something like TikTok. They might structure... They would start by talking into camera and then they splice in, but...
You know what it was like to me? Was when you come home from work and you tell your wife about a conversation you had with somebody at work. And he makes that into a comic.
Yes.
I had this chat with this guy, or you know what I heard two guys saying at work? And then you come home and you tell your spouse or whatever about that conversation, but he's actually made a comic book out of it.
Yeah. And made it interesting.
But I can't imagine the newspaper column or anything doing the voices.
No, because
like
it's it's just prose.
Yeah.
There's no pictures.
Yeah.
Right? So it's similar, but this is its own thing.
Yeah.
As you say.
Yeah.
It's a singular art style.
Yeah. I don't know anybody else that was doing anything like it.
No. He's really a trailblazer in this respect.
Yeah. So
the world of the internet owes a lot to the world of social media owes a lot to Harvey Pekar.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, he never got on there, but on AmericanSplendor.com, his foster daughter Danielle did have a blog running on
Amazing.
there. So
Amazing. I love that.
it must have been something like it must have been the next step. So Crumb drew a bunch of these.
Well,
usually about one per issue.
If we can open a tab.
Yeah.
Another astonishing thing about Pekar is that he couldn't draw.
Yes, that's right. That's right. But he believed in the art form.
Yeah, yeah.
He believed in comics.
Yeah.
And specifically, he understood like exactly what we're talking about, which is these are stories that you can't do.
Well,
comics can do this.
He conceived them in a way that couldn't be told.
Yeah.
In another medium.
Yeah.
Because he believed... I mean, he's said this many times. He said this many times when he was alive. He passed in 2010.
Yeah.
That comics were a medium that was capable of anything.
Yes. Yes.
And he said, it's just words and pictures.
Yes. Yeah.
And words and pictures can do anything.
Yeah. But he wasn't interested in doing adventure genre stuff. He wasn't interested in doing the undergrounds, which Crumb was doing. He was looking for something new, something in the middle. But yes, as he said, he couldn't draw. So Crumb drew a bunch of artists, artists.
Sorry, he would literally draw stick figures.
Yes.
He said he couldn't draw a straight line. He says that in the movie.
Yeah.
We have a great sequence in the movie where it's Paul Giamatti playing him. He just sort of scrawls 4 or 5 lines on a page to divide the panels and then draws stick figures. This is apparently what he did. He would draw the stick figures.
Yeah, I think he said he could actually draw a little bit better than Paul draws in the picture. That's actually Paul Giamatti drawing in the movie. I think he could do a little bit better. It's still no way he could draw. I mean, here we're building up to a certain point here, which is that he had a lot of other artists. So Crumb would come in and do maybe one story per issue, right? These are 60-page issues. He'd come and do 4 or 8 pages, something like that. He had a bunch of artists. Some of them were great. Some of them were journeymen. Mm-hmm. Some of them, and it's the same with the stories. It's hit or miss. Sometimes it's like, okay, this is a really interesting character, or sometimes it's like, what is this or this is going on too long, or it's all over the place.
Yeah, and because he was self-published, the artist would be pretty much anyone he could get.
Yes.
He would call them up and browbeat them.
Yeah, and he did that with Crumb as well. It's
Yeah.
not quite like in the movie. He really was, come on, Crumb, draw my comics.
Yeah.
Like, you got to do this for me, buddy.
In the forward, Crumb says that he got sick of drawing. He figured he would get stuck drawing Pekar's comics forever.
Yeah. Actually,
Unless he
Pekar was the only guy that he ever drew comics for.
Amazing.
There's only one or two other instances of Crumb illustrating somebody else's words. I can think of like the cat. There was a book with the Beginner's Guide to Kafka. I think he illustrated that, and maybe like one other thing. So it's a very strange situation with this collaboration happening.
Yeah. To me, the really extraordinary thing about it is that he didn't draw.
Yes.
I mean,
But he was thinking visually,
of course,
in a sense.
of course, he understood.
But he couldn't. Yeah.
It's just fun, and of course, comic writers that comic writers don't draw the eventual comic. We have writers and artists. Yeah. That's the way the process is kind of divided, isn't it? And then you've got inkers and letterers and all sorts of things.
Especially, it's very much assembly line in the U.S. system, especially. Yeah.
So collaborative in assembly line in one sense, collaborative in another. But usually we associate the comic with the writer.
Yeah.
And Pekar is the ultimate example of this.
Yes.
Because he drew stick figures.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's all him, though. I mean, the language, the dialogue, the writing, the way it's set up, it's all him. He understood it visually, as you're saying.
Yeah. So I believe he did like 17 issues of this himself. And then he actually was published by Dark Horse for about 10 years, I think from like 86 to 96.
Yep.
Now there's a shift. We get better artists coming in because Dark Horse they've got their stable, right? Or people they can contact. And then there was 8 issues that came out through Vertigo.
That's DC.
That's the DC adult like imprint.
Yep.
Vertigo Comics. So they had great artists. I have an issue here. There's 2 pages. So there's a Richard Corbin story in here.
Yeah.
There's 2 pages by Chris Weston at the back here, and this is a 2-pager about Pekar's signing at a comic convention. A guy comes in, he buys a comic from Pekar, his bag is dirty, his sister says, don't put it in the dirty bag. End of story. That's it. The punchline is, she says, the man with the cowboy hat who's buying comics says, you're right, it could ruin my day. The sister says, see, that's what little sisters are for. That's
the story.
That's the story. But it's drawn by Chris Weston in explosive detail, super hyper-realistic. It's like... I never imagined a universe where Chris Weston is going to be drawing Harvey Pekar
story
comics.
About
bizarre,
selling
absolutely bizarre,
crusty, kind of like Rust Belt guy.
By the way, I also want to point out the indicia in this issue, in all the Vertigo issues, says all characters featured in this issue. Okay, hang on a second. It says that the stories, characters, and incidents mentioned in this magazine are entirely fictional.
Well, that's not true. But they have to say that. That's not true at all.
It's a crazy disclaimer that started appearing once he went
once he went corporate. Yeah,
it's got like commercials for cars. It's got ad for cars and stuff, and this is like a weird period.
This is Vertigo.
This is a Vertigo one. So he started doing some graphic novels, and he also did like biographies of people. Like
yes.
I also got
he published books. Yeah.
This is the comic of A Scanner Darkly.
Yes.
The 2000. What year did that move? 2006. So this is the Linklater movie.
Yep.
And they made this comic book out of it, and it's got additional dialogue by Harvey Pekar. Now, I'm not sure what the additional dialogue is, but it's very weird to me that the same year that the movie came out, they also did an audiobook of it, read by Paul Giamatti. I'm like, is that a coincidence, or did Paul say, hey, I know a guy who can do the additional dialogue for your comic book version, or what the... It's bizarre.
I'm just literally staring off into space, trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
I think A Scanner Darkly just got bumped up a few notches on the cheat list.
Yeah, definitely, because there's like all sorts of comics connections going on in there. So there's a change in ourselves, but again, it's still hit and miss in terms of stories. Like some of them are like, okay, this is really interesting, and sometimes they're just like, why did you think this was interesting, Harvey?
It makes me think of it does remind me of a newspaper column or a column in a kind of like literary magazine or something like that, where They're just someone. I mean, his output is low,
Yeah.
right? Because he still has a day job. But it makes me think of a column that you read on a weekly basis in a magazine. Some of them are bangers,
Yeah.
and some of them they've obviously just knocked out the night before.
Yeah. So he used the pseudonym Jack in some of the early stories. I'm not sure why. It was kind of a bit of a... took a little time before he shifted into calling himself Harvey in the comics.
Okay.
But there is an issue too. There's the Who's Harvey Pekar story. This is one which is just Harvey addressing the camera for 12 panels a page for 2 or 3 pages, talking about how he found 2 other Harvey Pekars in the phone book. And it's Harvey, he's dressed in a suit. It doesn't even really look like him. It's a very odd one. But he does talk about how he has an unusual name based on his background.
Yeah.
And yet there were 2 other Harvey Pekars in Cleveland.
Yes. Harvey Pekar Sr. and Harvey Pekar Jr.
Yeah. And
which
then
he found out when someone at his work passed on their condolences at his father passing away.
Yeah.
He's like, my father didn't pass away. It turned out it was one of the other Harvey Pekars, and that was when he realised that they were father and son. And then the son passed away like 8 months later.
Yeah.
And then he was back to one Harvey Pekar.
No, it was... Oh, yeah, he was the only one.
And then another one popped up.
In the phone book, yeah.
And it's just a fun little story.
Yeah. It's not even... It's an anecdote.
Anecdote.
It's something somebody tells you at a party. It's not even an anecdote.
And it is like that because we see here, like, the panels look like... This is it's like a 9-panel...
Yeah, something...
Or perhaps maybe 12. And, a lot of them he looks... It's 12, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 12.
And in a lot of them he looks exactly the same. It's like they've just used the same art.
Yeah.
So it's like you're having a conversation with a really intense, awkward person at a party.
Yeah.
And yet, such is his style that he imbues it with a certain pathos, a certain depth. You feel you come away with it feeling like there was something you should have learned from that.
There is definitely some wisdom in some of these comics.
Wisdom's a good word.
There's something profound and deep going on. Even when he's not speaking to camera, sometimes it's just life.
Yeah.
These tiny bits of life happening that he's noticing and everybody else is kind of... The rest of us are ignoring. So the other one, so we had to just pick a couple of random ones to read for the
Some of the ones which were in the...
Some of the ones which are in the movie, which I remembered, okay, these ones are in the movie. Standing behind old Jewish ladies in supermarket lines, to me, is an absolute cracker. This is a long... He starts addressing the reader, talking about how he avoids standing behind the Jewish ladies because they've got all these coupons and stuff and they take forever to get through the line. But and then there's one day he stands behind this lady, he takes a risk, but standing behind this Jewish lady. But she's actually fine. But the problem is the clerk she actually tries to return some change to the clerk, and he knows this.
The clerk.
The cashier is the one who
made a mistake.
Sometimes has issues, and then she's made a mistake giving her the wrong change, but she refuses to believe it. And then the end of the story, he says, knowing that I was watching, she sneered at the old woman as she walked out of the store and then grinned at me as if to say, we both know that old lady is nuts, but what that cashier didn't know was that I knew she was a fuck-up. Anyway, that was one of the most interesting incidents that's ever happened to me in a supermarket. Maybe the most interesting, as a matter of fact. Think about that. That is epic. Like, this is the most interesting thing that's ever happened to him in a supermarket, is to see this lady return her change and the cashier try to act like it wasn't her mistake.
Yeah. The in the introduction to the book, Crumb, which was written by Robert Crumb, he says, the subject matter of these stories is so staggeringly mundane.
Yes. Yes.
It verges on the exotic.
Yes. Yes. That is so accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what
it's like something, if you saw it in a movie, it'd be in something like Fight Club or something like, which has similar kinds of, I suppose, observations about regular life, but less mean-spirited than Fight Club. But it'd be the sort of thing that if it was in a movie, people would be quoting all the time.
Right. Yes. What's another one that we picked out here? Oh, the one where, what is it? American Splendor assaults the media.
Is that a Crumb one?
Yes. Yeah. American Splendor.
That's the one that everyone thinks of where he's... We'll have to put this on Facebook.
Yeah.
this grotesquerie of an initial
his
panel.
shirt's all ripped up. He looks sweaty and
sweating.
terrible, and it just reams of dialogue. Beautiful drawings by Robert Crumb, but there's barely any space for them because there's so much just text about this. Pekar had gotten a kind of a foot in at the Village Voice, I think it was, and then they published 2 of his stories, and he wasn't getting callbacks from anybody, and he couldn't get through to anybody, the editors. It just goes on and on and on.
Oh man, it's amazing.
And it's yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to say, but I just put it in because I do think there's not all the stories are just him listening to people at the office. There's one where this guy's trying to sell ochre to these ladies. It's just crazy. He's not even in that one. He's just it's just an overheard conversation. But then sometimes he's got something to say.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah.
I got to say this thing about the media.
He's got a rant.
Yes, he's got a rant, and it's in there. What others? Do we have any others that we needed to?
And another thing is he certainly doesn't. You get the sense that it's very honest.
Yes.
And also, he doesn't go easy on himself.
No, that's true.
He talks about his terrible habits, not disingenuously, like he's serious. He talks about being a skinflint. He talks about being untidy.
Yep.
He's like grimy. He doesn't eat well.
Yes.
When he goes places, he'll pinch stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or he'll always be looking for something for free.
Yes.
Like later on, he starts appearing on David Letterman,
Yes.
the David Letterman show, or the late night with David Letterman, and we get in one of the stories that we read. The first thing he does when he gets to the green room or whatever is he just asks if he can take some of the books that are lying.
Apparently, he was hanging around on the movie set a lot for the catering.
I've no trouble believing it. A lot of the time, money woes as well is a persistent theme, and he never had any money.
Yes. Apparently, his first wife took almost everything.
Really? Okay.
He didn't have much, and his second wife took his car, and he had to buy it back from her.
Oh, that sucks.
That kind of thing was happening to him. He had bad luck, and
like
then he had
very
good luck, and that's what a lot of the stories are about.
Never that much good luck though, because he's a real working class hero type.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, there's
unlikable.
What I would call small victories, like the Halloween story drawn by Corbin, where he finds Danielle's glasses.
Yes.
And he's thought, oh my God, they're lost forever. She comes home after Halloween and says, I lost my glasses. He's like, $150 glasses, and he's freaking out in these thought balloons about how he's going to have to buy new glasses. They're never going to find them, and then he finds them, and it's
like a flower among cement, among concrete.
Yes.
These kinds of stories.
Yes.
Yeah, there'll be a small victory, as you put it. Very good.
Yeah. I did want to point out there's some stories where Crumb is drawing himself because...
Yeah, that's really odd.
It is weird because he isn't writing these stories.
No, I made a note of that
and
too.
Pekar's like, okay, you have to draw this story that I wrote about you. So whatever inaccuracy he's put in there, Crumb, I don't know if he's fixing them, but it's very interesting because the movie is almost the same thing where okay, we're going to make up this Halloween scene about you and you've got to narrate it. Go.
Yeah.
Very weird situation.
Yeah, it is odd to... I made a note of that as well, that Crumb is illustrating a scene that he experienced, but this is not a story that he wrote.
Yeah.
Yet he's providing the art for their meeting. He's drawing himself.
Yeah.
Hanging out with Harvey Pekar in his grimy apartment talking about jazz records.
Yeah.
Must have been a very, very strange experience.
Yeah, I mean, he drew himself in his own comics, but he was writing those.
Yeah, of course, he wrote those, so that's a different matter.
Odd, strange thing.
That struck me too.
Okay, maybe
Did you see the one? There's one you didn't ask us to read it. Asked me to read it for the recording, but I just read it anyway. It's one where it's about Ozzie Nelson talking to Robert Crumb.
Yes, I did read that one
because there's a Ralph Bakshi connection. It's about Fritz the cat.
yes, absolutely.
So Ozzie Nelson, some washed-up actor from the 50s, is that I've never heard of, but yeah, there you go. Is in this comic lecturing Crumb about just letting go of the fact that Fritz the cat got made.
Yes, and Crumb's drawing this.
Yeah.
I think that was a Crumb one.
I don't think it was.
No,
I don't think it was. But and they even mentioned Funny World, that magazine that I quoted from a lot last week.
Yeah.
So that was funny to read. It's just like, you got paid, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's just like, just take your money and shut up.
Yeah.
It's funny.
One other thing I did want to mention was how I came across this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Which was that I was just, when I was started heavily collecting Alan Moore comics. You can ring the bell for that.
And so I shall.
And then I was like, American Splendor number 15 is on the list. So I bought this issue. And there's a one-pager drawn by Alan Moore in here.
I read that.
And this was, I don't know how old I was, 16, 17. It was too much for my brain. Because, first of all, Alan Moore was, I'd never seen his stipple style. He has this underground cartooning style that he used when he was drawing for the papers,
Stars,
the
My
sounds.
Generation or whatever.
Yeah. So I was like, what is this? And also, what is this quote-unquote story? It's just this one-pager of this guy telling a bingo joke, like a joke he tells when he calls bingo.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I'm looking through this issue, and it's just stuff happening. And I'm like, I couldn't process it.
Sure.
At the time.
Yeah. I think that's the way a lot of people would react to it.
But then I started, I was like, okay, this is a comics guy. I don't remember how I found this at that time. Maybe my comic shop had, I don't remember. But then I started seeing him on Letterman. And I'm trying to figure out the timeline of this because I don't remember staying out that late to watch Letterman when I was like 16, but maybe I did because I remember the meltdown, the final.
Whoa, really?
It
wasn't really the final one, but
no, there was one
the
after.
film makes it seem like no, two after actually. Once in 92 and once in 93, or maybe 93 and 94. Right.
Yeah. I have a memory of seeing it, and it was never rebroadcast. It was like suppressed, like they weren't allowed to show it again.
And in fact, same goes for the film. They requested the footage, but they weren't allowed to have it.
That's right. Yeah.
Although I read that they had a copy of it anyway.
Yeah, they had a very rough copy of VHS, like very old transfer.
They couldn't get it to. You couldn't understand what Pekar and Letterman were saying to one another, so they left it. Anyway, sorry, your story.
Yeah, no, that's it. So I have a memory of that. I don't know. Maybe I saw it on the news or I don't know how I knew about it, but I have a memory of it. And I certainly remember seeing him. And Letterman at that time in the 80s was amazing because he would have like writers on there and all sorts of characters. It wasn't like your Graham Norton, like just the most glamorous actors.
Well, clearly not, because he had he had Harvey Pekar on it.
He would have people who did comics and stuff on it. It was very surprising and interesting at that time. It was a weird, like, New York freak show that Letterman at that period of time.
I mean, in case it's not clear, Harvey Pekar never achieved what you would call mainstream success.
No. And didn't sell any extra comics from being on Letterman, apparently.
Oh, that's
according to him.
Yeah, well, he would say something like that, wouldn't he? But, he would print, I think, 10,000 copies of his comic a year.
Yeah.
Sell about 5,000 of them.
Right.
In that year. The rest he would just sort of dribble out.
Yeah.
So this isn't a lot of comics.
No.
This is not enough to live on.
Yeah.
Apparently he had a good reputation, especially in Cleveland.
Yes.
Where he was sort of like a fixture.
Yeah, there's a scene in the movie where he meets this girl he went to university with. And she's like, "Oh, you're famous. You write about jazz and comics," and that was a real thing that happened.
But nothing like an obscure figure, really.
Yeah.
Kind of like especially compared to your Gaiman or Grant Morrison or whoever.
Oh yeah, no. But he had the reputation. You're right, and even the press were calling, what were they calling him, the Mark Twain of the Blue Collar Man or something like that?
The Blue Collar Mark Twain, and the Poet Laureate of Cleveland, he's also described as. Yeah. These are nice accolades, but they didn't come with cash.
No.
Not at all. He didn't, even this film, he made some money off it, but he just spent it all on his stepdaughter's, his foster daughter's education.
Right.
Which apparently he hadn't budgeted for because of the vasectomy.
Right, yes. Right. Okay, we'll talk about all that. Okay, so I think we can move to the movie.
Film. Yeah, absolutely.
We've kind of given a sense of.
I hope people have got a sense of this irascible.
Yeah, just strange, fascinating comics. Okay, so 2003, we get this movie directed by two people, a husband and wife team, Robert Pulcini and Shari Springer Berman.
Yes.
Okay, we start with the Halloween scene as we described, where these kids are dressed as Superman, Batman.
Perfect. Much like the My Friend Dharma prologue.
Yeah.
This is prologue as microcosm.
Yes. This woman answers the door. She's very pleased with their costumes. And then she gets to the fourth kid, and it's Harvey Pekar, who's just this little kid dressed as nothing. He's got no costume.
He's just wearing regular clothes.
She says, "Who are you supposed to be?" He says, "I'm Harvey Pekar."
Yep.
And she's like, "What's that?" Whatever. And then he grumpily, I think she gives him candy, maybe?
No, he runs off before she gives him candy. He just says, "To hell with this. I didn't want to dress up like a superhero. I'm sick of it." And then he goes, "To hell with this," he leaves. And then he throws his pillowcase into a gutter.
There's a subtext here for, it's not in the movie or in the comics, but if you're into comics, that Siegel and Schuster were from Cleveland, right?
Okay.
Although Joe Shuster was originally from Toronto, the Canadian government will try to tell you he's Canadian. He's whatever. But they were from Cleveland, so there's this. They're like, here you got the Superman creators.
Yeah.
On one end of the spectrum, you got these kids dressed up as Superman and Batman, Spider-Man, and then you've got Harvey Pekar here. So yeah, he walks away. He's grumpy, and then you get a snap cut, and we get Paul Giamatti, grown up, walking down the same street.
Yeah.
Now, opening credits, it's divided up into panels.
Yeah. And this is, yes. Yeah. And this isn't like Ang Lee's Hulk.
No.
This is nice.
Yes. It's not even like the Prince Valiant where they tried to do that for the scene translate.
We love, on Comic Book Movie Oblivion, we love your credits.
Yes.
With your comic book aesthetic.
Yes. They use the font. They use the Crumb font for this sequence, not in the later scenes, which we'll talk about the font in other sequences.
This is probably one of the best ones, if not the best one that we've seen. I think the way that they do this, this looks really good.
Yeah, he's walking through various parts of Cleveland, but it's every time it cuts to a different shot, it's actually we're swiping to another panel with a Robert Crumb type kind of wiggly border, panel border,
and with a caption with the comic. Like a caption looks like a comic caption. It's got a comic font. We know exactly what we're looking at.
And he tells us what this is about. Because we start getting voiceover from, not Paul Giamatti, but the real Harvey Pekar. And he says, "This is the guy playing me in this movie."
Yes.
And he says, "I'm drawn by lots of different artists, so I look different." And you get to panels or drawings from different artists. And he says, "But here's me, I'm the real guy." And we get a picture.
And then we see him.
We see him.
Not just a picture, but it cuts to him.
Yes.
He's sitting.
Oh, well, that's a bit later. In one of the panels, we just get his face, much like a comic.
But it's not long before.
That is a shock when that happens, and we'll get to that.
Well,
based on the comic book series American Splendor by Harvey Pekar is the credit we get in the opening. We haven't had an admission of being based on a comic book in several weeks, I think. And our cancer year. So there's a spoiler right in the opening credits by Harvey Pekar and Joyce Brabner, who is his wife later on, his third wife.
Yes.
Yes, I think now, after the credits, we cut to the real Harvey, I think. So and this is in a white room.
Yeah.
So it's like a comic book panel that has had no background drawn in.
That's exactly what it's like. Yeah.
And he comes away from a microphone where he's been recording the opening narration. He's like, "How's that? That was your fourth take. Are you happy with it? Is it good enough for you?" That kind of thing.
This is... Yeah, go on.
Okay, so now we're like, so we've started a movie with a fictional scene of Halloween, which we, as a viewer, we kind of, this has to be fictional. Then we get Paul Giamatti. I guess if you don't know anything about what's going on, you're like, okay, this is the movie, this is your actor.
Yeah.
We've got a hint that Harvey Pekar, this is what he really looks like. He's told us that he writes comic books. Okay, it's going to be about this guy that writes comic books. Then we cut, and it's not Paul Giamatti, it's Harvey Pekar in a fake studio recording this thing.
So yeah, it's not a real studio. It's a mock-up. It's like a set.
Yeah.
That's mocked up to look like a comic panel.
Yeah, with a few props around. Background. Yeah.
It looks like Lars von Trier's Dogville or something like that.
Yeah.
They couldn't be more explicit with what they're saying.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Exactly.
And it's as you say. Look at this adaptation of a comic.
Yes.
Here's your opening titles with comic panels and captions. Here's a guy walking down the street. Now we're going to have the actual guy.
Yeah.
Now we're going to show the actual guy in a comics panel background telling us about what he's doing here.
Yes.
So part of this comes from the actors the director's background as documentary filmmakers.
Right.
So there's some documentary tropes going on here, you know, or techniques, you might say.
But it's fascinating to me that this is supposed to be the real Pekar. This is the real stuff, and it's the most comic booky setting for it. Because we got this white background with a kind of few props here and there.
Yeah.
What a choice.
Yeah. They're telling, I mean, we're seeing adaptation occurring in real time.
Yes. Yeah.
Look, this is an adaptation of a comic.
Yeah.
Don't mistake this for real life.
That's right.
We're going to put the real person in a comic panel.
Right. And did you know
Don't mistake this for real life, watcher. This is an adaptation of a comic.
This will spoil the ending, but all the film, so they did something called flashing the film stock, so it looked grainier.
Okay.
So all those scenes in Cleveland look grainier than the film actually would shoot it, right? They didn't change that until the end when he gets a phone call from the doctor, and then they went to normal stock, so it was clearer. But they're kind of fuzzying the movie, right? It was really... I didn't know what to... I'm still processing it. I've seen this movie 4 times. I'm still trying to understand all the moving parts here.
It's very clever.
Yes, so... Oh, by the way, Giamatti at this stage, this is a year before Sideways, right? So he's not like the huge star that he would become. He is going to be an all-star on this podcast, though. He's gonna get there.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
I did a little poking around about Paul Giamatti. So you clearly did too. Let's see. We'll be able to compare notes later.
Okay. Okay, so now we cut back to... We talked to the real Harvey for a bit, then we cut back to the fake Harvey. And it's 1975, and he's lost his voice. He's got some... What do they call them? Nodules?
He's got nodules on his throat.
On his throat.
From too much yelling at his second wife.
Yes. Now, how did Giamatti do this voice? Because I'm just thinking of The Holdovers, which came out last year, and he wore this very painful thing in his eye. Did we talk about this for some reason on the podcast? He had this contact lens in his eye that was apparently extremely painful to make it look like he was wall-eyed.
Okay. Oh.
And I'm like, okay, what did he do with his voice here?
Would it be when we did The Outsider with when she had she wore a wall-eye prosthetic as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. With Jane Micucci?
Kate Micucci.
Kate Micucci,
yeah. Okay,
anyway, so how did he do this voice?
I don't know, but it's wild. His voice he's got no voice. Yes, exactly.
I got no voice.
Yeah.
Sounds very authentic.
Yes. So...
And this is essentially where our narrative begins.
Yes.
He's miserable. He's just divorced his second wife, or his second wife has left him.
He's a bit of a hypochondriac. He's always worried he's got cancer.
Yep, and we get a pretty clear message that he's not super happy with his life.
Yeah.
He talks about his job disparagingly. I mean, he held onto this job like a drowning man hanging onto a...
Oh, yeah, and there's a scene later in the movie where he wakes up from a nightmare. I've got a job! He wakes up. And according to Joyce, this actually happens. Yeah. Like, he does have this nightmare occasionally where he wakes up, like, I have a job.
In some of the... Was it either in the film or in the comics, he talks about how his art was something that he could just do, but his job was something that brought him no end of stress.
Yeah.
Because he had to have it. Yeah. And as you say, he never accepted promotion. Yeah. Who knows why? Probably because he felt that maybe it would bring in uncertainty, or I read somewhere that he ended up retiring at the age he did, 62 or 63, because of anxiety attacks.
Right.
So he's still really anxious at his job.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
the wife leaves him. It was interesting to me because we get the first person narration is from Real Harvey.
Yep. As he's credited. He's credited as Real Harvey. Yeah.
So Real Harvey's telling us this. So part of what's happening... So it's very economical storytelling because he just says, my second wife's leaving. We don't have to hear about the first wife or anything. It's just all there in 1 or 2 sentences. But we are forced to believe what he's saying is true because he has introduced himself in a documentary comic book panel setting saying I'm the real guy. So every word that comes out, it's like, okay, this is how it happened.
Yes. Right. But also, the film's constantly thumbing its nose at us.
Oh, yeah.
To don't take this seriously, you idiots.
Yeah. Yes.
So whenever we see Harvey, he's going to be in this artificial environment.
Yes.
You know, like with the white, and even even later we get what are deliberate behind the scenes,
Yeah.
where we've been introduced to, say, a character who has a very distinctive way of speaking,
Toby,
and then we cut. to...
shocking!
It you just about fall out of your seat.
Yeah.
It is shocking.
Yeah.
We cut to a scene again in the white zone, which is not a real place. They're eating jelly beans. So the real Harvey and real Toby are talking to one another, just like they did in the preceding scene, and eating jelly beans. Meanwhile, the actors playing Harvey and Toby are watching them have this conversation.
The shocking part to me was the cut, because we see fake Harvey, Paul Giamatti, doing his filing work, and then there's a cut, and then he's in the white room.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, cut. And they're moving the cameras around. They're moving the microphones around. But he's in this white space, which is not the real space that they're shooting in. Like, we haven't backed up to see the cameras.
No.
We're in this false setting. And then he goes away. They have a conversation about jelly beans. Toby, who, if you haven't seen him before on MTV in the 80s or his 2 movies he did for Troma, if you don't know who this guy is...
Killer
Nerd and Bride of Killer Nerd. If you don't know who this guy is, you're like, well, this is just a made-up character for this movie. No. You see him the next minute, in the next scene, you see the real guy there
and
talking about jelly beans. By the way, DVD commentary, a lot of talk about jelly beans.
Amazing.
And his favorite... I'll talk about the DVD commentary later.
Amazing.
Yeah. But,
yeah, so...
Oh yeah, and by the way, so as you mentioned, they're in the background sitting on like director's chairs, watching the 2 real people interact, and Toby's talking about loneliness or something, and Giamatti is cracking up.
Yeah.
And on DVD commentary, he didn't know he was on camera.
Oh, amazing.
So he's actually really cracking up listening to these 2 real people.
It's extraordinary, because Toby, when you're first introduced to Toby, I mean, as you said, I had no idea he was a real person. He just seems like some kind of, like the way he talks.
He talks like nerds.
Nerds.
I'm a genuine nerd.
My favorite movie is Revenge of the Nerds.
Which, in the DVD commentary, he mentions he's seen it 40 times.
And you think this, and then you think this. Well, this is an exaggeration. And then you get this smash cut, and he's talking, and he sounds identical.
He's played by Judah Friedlander in the movie. Something I want to point out. So, like, Judah is wearing a genuine nerd. As he plays Toby, he's wearing a genuine nerd button. He borrowed that from Toby. And Paul Giamatti and Harvey Pekar are the same size, so Paul Giamatti is wearing Harvey's clothes in the movie. Oh,
you're kidding. Oh, that's amazing.
The suit he wears on Letterman is Harvey's suit that he wore on Letterman.
Yeah, that's some filming in the Dharma House weirdness right there.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But it's really effective. But all this stuff, it's really, it captures something, a quintessence of something about the comics.
Yes.
As well. The way that all of this, the way because Harvey's always talking to us from within the borders within the borders of a panel. And it's deliberate, you know. I've got an interview with the directors, with IndieWire, not long after it was made. And they asked, couldn't you have just made a documentary about him?
Right. Right, interesting.
And Pulcini said, we weren't interested in doing just a documentary. You know, he said, it takes a long time and you have Crumb already. He says, that movie's phenomenal, so why do that?
Yeah.
We'll probably do Crumb at some point. And then his wife says, if there was ever a story that called for narrative, documentary, and animation, it's this. Because Harvey is represented in so many different ways in American Splendor, the comic. Pulcini, we weren't trying to be clever or break the mold. We just wanted to honour the material. This made the most sense. And I think there's a lot... I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we get several scenes of him at work, talking to Mr. Boats, who's a character that shows up in the comic a lot. This interesting old black dude. And the dialogue's right out of the comic, like we get... And they've structured it like they've joined linked conversations together and stuff.
It's very clever. The American Splendor defies narrative because it's just anecdotes.
Yeah.
Apropos of nothing. Usually. He just launches right into it. It's like a Seinfeld routine. What's the deal with old Jewish ladies?
Yeah.
But they've welded it into a coherent narrative, essentially. And it starts with him having lost his voice.
Yeah.
And it all makes sense. I didn't read a comic where he lost his voice, but probably, I don't know, there probably is one.
You know what? There were several scenes in the movie. Okay, so because I haven't read all the comics, right?
No.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
But there's scenes that were like when he met that girl, which I mentioned earlier, the girl that he went to college with.
Yeah.
In the bakery, I was like, this seems made up. And then no,
It's real.
that really happened.
Yeah.
And every time there was a scene, there's like the scene when he has cancer and he wakes up in the night and he says, "Who am I? Am I a writer of comics or am I a character in a comic?"
Yeah.
And then he collapses on the floor. I was like, no, this
That
is
can't
made
be
up.
real.
And Joyce said, no, this is a scary thing that really happened.
Incredible. So it must be in my our cancer year.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is fine. I mean, we have a series of scenes. He's got no voice, so he's trying to say something, but he can't.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it so far. He talks about his job, how much he hates it, how he feels like a flunky, how he's not going to leave a mark.
There's a important scene which is made up for the movie where he drops a bunch of files on
Yes.
the floor,
I was
and he
about to bring
picks
that up.
one up and opens it, and it shows this guy who lived in Cleveland from 1943 to
23.
75 or whatever. Yeah. Died file clerk, occupation clerk. That's it. That was the guy's whole life, and that's the moment when he starts trying to make comics.
Well, it's all these things,
Yeah.
you know, all together, you know. But that, yeah, are you going to live and die in Cleveland as a file clerk your whole life? Are you going to be a flunky, or do you have something to say? And then he meets Crumb.
Yes, played by James Urbaniak, who seems to be doing Crumb from the documentary. Now, apparently, Urbaniak had wanted to play Crumb before. I don't know what he was thinking, but he was like, I want to play Robert Crumb in a movie before he came in.
Oh, no kidding.
And I think he does a great version of Crumb, especially the little sneering laugh and stuff. He's really great, but apparently Aline Kaminsky Crumb really hates this version of Crumb and says she would never have married that guy that's in this movie. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, so yeah, he came in, he was quite... By the way, Judah Friedlander also had seen Killer Nerd before he came in for his audition, and
Had he really?
that's how he nailed it, because he'd watched that and came in,
was
he
able
knew...
to do it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just from watching the bloke eating jelly beans?
No.
Well, that's a scene, yeah. You know, like that's a scene. Speaking of people wanting to play people, apparently, thanks to Pekar's indie cred, actors did approach the production wanting to play Harvey Pekar.
Okay.
The only one mentioned in an interview I read was Rob Schneider.
Oh my god. Oh, that would have been rough.
Well, that's what Brabner said. She said, quote, "It would have been an absolute disaster."
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so he meets Crumb. Crumb reads his stick figure comics, his drafts.
Yep.
And he's like, this is pretty good, Harv. And he agrees
So he asks to draw. And then, just like that, Harvey gets his voice back.
Yes. Yes.
And just in case you didn't get it, he says, "You cured me, man!"
Yeah. Yeah, Crumb says, what happened to your voice, man? Your voice is okay, or something like that.
We get it, film.
Yeah, so he's grateful to Crumb, which is not quite how it plays out in the comics, where he's like haranguing Crumb into drawing comics for him.
Oh yeah. But we get some great little sequences where he talks about the potential of comics, how comics can be more than just animals or superheroes. A little bit like Ralph Bakshi there. Some parallels with last week.
Yeah.
And I just love we see him drawing his stick figures and writing his dialogue, as you saw Paul Giamatti doing the art. And you just get, and of course he's in these squalid surroundings, which never really change for the whole movie. And there's a little message there of the starving artist.
Yes.
And also that it's almost like if you strip everything away, this is what creativity is.
Yeah.
Starving in a filthy apartment drawing stick figures.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, there's a sequence where he seems to be up all night looking at this page, right? Like the dawn, they change the lighting so it's suddenly dawn.
Yep. It's good.
Okay, so he starts self-publishing this comic, comes out for a few years, he's doing one a year, right?
Yes.
Then we cut to Delaware, and we meet Joyce Brabner, who's this woman working in a comic shop.
Played by Hope Davis.
Hope Davis, yes. I think she had been in About Schmidt before this, the Jack Nicholson picture.
Okay.
It was around this time, or before, I can't remember exactly.
Apparently she was terrified of Brabner.
Right. Interesting. Apparently, they
had to ask the directors to get Brabner to leave when she was doing her scenes. She said she felt like she was staring holes in her.
Right. Interesting.
This comes from Brabner.
Right.
By the way. Not from Davis.
Apparently, another story they tell on the DVD commentary, I think, is that they would hear Joyce and Danielle, real Joyce, real Danielle, would hear Harvey yelling in another room.
Yeah.
And they would go in to stop him yelling because he was going to lose his voice, and it was Giamatti.
That's crazy. That's nuts.
And Giamatti did say she told him off for something once. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, yeah, it was some crazy little
apparently
bits.
Joyce Bradman didn't think much of Hope Davis.
She didn't say anything bad about her on the commentary, but they did say that Joyce, Hope Davis only met with Joyce like one time.
Right.
To like get the character down or whatever. Apparently got it really... I mean, Toby on the commentary says that she's exactly like Joyce.
Okay. In the interview I read, she said she knew me inside out.
Yeah.
And the interviewer says, I think this was sarcasm, but maybe it wasn't.
Right.
Because he thinks that because she then went on to bag her out.
Right.
Like, because she didn't like being around Joyce and asked the director to make her leave and found her really intense.
Huh.
But, you know, she might have been sincere.
That might just be craft related, like acting related, like needs to concentrate.
We won't know unless Hope Davis writes in.
Yeah, right.
If you're listening, Ms. Davis, we'd be very pleased to hear from you.
Right. So Joyce is working in this comic shop in Delaware. It's not a great situation. She's a bit like... It's great when we cut to her because she's a bit like the Harvey of Delaware. Right. She's freaking out. She's looking for the new issue of American Splendor. They're sold out. She had set one aside for herself to read. They had sold that copy. She absolutely loses her mind over this. She has a huge meltdown. The guy working with her is like, whoa, okay, like, calm down. So she calls up Harvey directly to try to get some stock in.
Yeah.
And they... or she sends him a letter.
No, she wants the issue.
Yes, she wants the issue.
She doesn't want to order a whole another lot of stock.
Right.
She decides to write to him and see if he could just send her
the
issue, which he obviously could because he's the publisher.
Yeah. Yeah. So they have a bit of a... they start corresponding by mail and by phone. Amazing scene where he's on his... there's a scene where he's reading her letter while he's sitting on the toilet. Toilet paper is sitting on the bathtub. Like, he doesn't have a roll holder for it. There's a scene where he's in bed on the phone with her, and he's got a box of Cocoa Puffs on his nightstand in his bedroom.
Yeah. Well, it's not even a bedroom. It's a bed in the middle of his living room.
Yes, that's right.
Presumably his bedroom's full of records or comics or something.
Yes.
It's just amazing.
She's worried about meeting him because she believed that the motion lines in the comic were stink lines.
She said that Crumb draws him like an ape.
Yes.
Like a dirty ape. And there's always stink lines coming off him. And he's like, they're not stink lines, they're motion lines.
Yeah.
I'm a very active man.
Yeah. Oh, so one thing we skipped over before we got to when he started doing the comics and he was stuck, that all-nighter, he's like, I don't know what to do. We get the old Jewish ladies at the grocery store sequence.
Yeah.
So he goes to the grocery store. This was another bombshell scene. He goes to the grocery store, and as he's thinking, we get word balloons appearing on screen, which are drawn and animated.
Thought
balloons over his head.
Yeah.
Which are animated versions of him talking about how annoyed he is by this lady.
We constantly see the different artist representations of Pekar appearing around the place.
Yes, and so when we get to Joyce, when Joyce decides she's going to come meet him in person, he convinces her to come to Cleveland.
Yeah.
She shows up at the train station and she's looking around, where's Harvey going to be? And she sees different cartoon versions of him drawn by different artists. So there's like the real slob version from Assaults the Media that Crumb drew with the torn shirt that's scratching his armpits.
Yeah, and with the sweat pouring
we
off
get
him and the stink lines.
The young Marlon Brando version.
As she described it, yes.
And then like one that's kind of like in between or something. And so that reminded me of that grocery store scene where you see him working out the comics like he's thinking in comics in his head. Yeah, so she's thinking about him in terms of comics as well, because we get these animated versions of him walking around. But then he walks up to her and he says, before this goes anywhere, what was the line?
I've had a vasectomy.
I've had a vasectomy. First sentence out of his mouth. And then he walks off.
No, I had a vasectomy.
I had a vasectomy.
And then he just walks off.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. They go out on a date to a cheap restaurant. In reality, it was McDonald's.
Why not just put the McDonald's
maybe they could
licensing? Maybe.
Yeah, I'm guessing that was it. It's like a TGI Fridays or something in the movie, but it seems pretty cheap. She's got all sorts of dietary requirements.
Yep.
she talks about she's not a vegetarian, but she can't eat certain things, and she talks about it being she has political limitations, or I can't remember. She describes it in a funny way.
Yes,
but she just seems just as weird as him.
Yes. Yes, and he says he's a vegetarian as well, but he seems sort of half-hearted about it.
Yeah.
I read that he wasn't a vegetarian at that point, actually.
Right. Okay, right.
He became one eventually,
right.
I think because of Joyce's influence.
Right.
But at this point he wasn't, but it's fine. It's funny, especially the way how he half-asses it.
Yeah.
And then the food makes her sick. She vomits. So they go back to his flat.
They go back to his place. They start making out.
Yes.
She starts to get sick.
Yes.
She goes and vomits. He's bought some chamomile tea for her because he knows that's what she likes.
He's bought 5 or 6 different kinds of tea because he knows she drinks tea.
Yes.
And
apparently this was real as
well. Yes. We know it's real because it makes it into the play that we see shortly.
That's right, yes.
As well. And she's apparently so touched by the fact that he bought 7 or 8 boxes of different teas. She said, I think we should skip the courtship and just get married.
Yes.
This is the night they met.
It wasn't just the teas. I think it was just everything was like they were made for each other.
They were perfect for one another. Yeah. So yes, the play. Then we have a little scene.
We get the Revenge of the Nerds bit first.
Oh, yes.
There's a little bit where he's going to marry her after knowing her for a week, right?
Yep.
Toby's driving 200 miles to Akron or somewhere, I can't remember, to see Revenge of the Nerds because they're not playing in Cleveland for whatever reason. And he's obsessed with this, and also eating White Castle hamburgers is another thing.
Yes.
That Toby's obsessed with. Anyway, they all 3 of them go to see the movie. Joyce and Toby are like, well, this is a movie that empowers nerds. Pekar's losing his mind. This is the dumbest movie.
Yes.
How can you believe this crap? Whatever. Okay. Now he's starting to get a little bit of fame because of I don't know quite, but he's getting a little bit of traction.
Yeah, people read his comics and he's getting a certain underground cred.
Yeah.
Not quite like the underground comics, but some cred. And, so undergraduates or postgraduates at some universities or theatre, like people doing Bachelor of Theatre or whatever, are interested in working American Splendor into place. And apparently this happened 3 times.
Yes.
3 separate times people have made American Splendor.
So
this has a certain appeal for a certain type of person.
There was a production in Pennsylvania in 85.
Yes.
Now the movie presents it as 85,
yes.
I think. There was a production in Washington, D.C.
No, the movie presents it as... Oh, yeah, sorry, it presents it as 85.
The movie presents it as L.A. 85.
Yes.
That's not how it worked out. The reality was Pennsylvania 85, Washington 87, and then there was a 90-91 LA production.
Yes.
Starring Dan Castellaneta as Harvey Pekar. Wait a second, I got a bonus fact for you. When Harvey went to see the Washington production in 87, he attended with Alan Moore on his one visit to the U.S.
What?
Yeah. Alan Moore went to the U.S. one time, never traveled again, but he went to see American Splendor with Harvey in Washington.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Wow, I forgive you for stealing my thunder with that factoid.
There was a bit of a relationship happening here because Joyce, I don't know about the timeline of the movie, Joyce became kind of politically active. And she published this comic book called Real War Stories, which was kind of an anti-military comic. And she edited this.
Okay.
And she recruited Alan Moore to write one of the stories in here. So they formed this relationship about that's how Alan ended up drawing that one page in American Splendor 15.
Amazing.
And then Alan wrote some, like, an introduction for one of the later, like, book-length... He did a book-length book called Cleveland, just called Cleveland, and Alan Moore wrote the introduction. So there's some interaction. And after Pekar died, Alan Moore did this... They did a Kickstarter to build a statue of Harvey.
Yes.
In Cleveland, and Alan was, like, did this talk on... like Kickstarter to, like, for raising funds.
Brilliant.
So they had a kind of ongoing relationship overseas. Oh, and after the movie came out, when Harvey and Joyce and Danielle went on a world tour to promote it, they stopped in England and went to, like, Alan Moore's house and, like, hung out and stuff.
Excellent.
Yes.
We like an Alan Moore connection.
So this movie, the play, this is also a really fascinating scene to me. Because you watch the scene of the courtship.
We've just seen this scene.
We've seen this scene in the restaurant. They come home, they make out, she throws up, and she comes out of the toilet and says, I think we should get married. And you're like, this can't be real. But then you watch the play, and it looks so phony on stage. They're like, oh, that was real. I don't know quite how this is functioning, but it really accentuated how real the movie version of the courtship...
Well, we're getting layers. right? You know, because I mean, the movie's not real. The filmmakers want us to know that.
Right.
That's why they keep shoving these
That's right, yeah.
bizarre panels in. I mean, I've got a quote. We knew we wanted to put Harvey in the movie. We thought how to approach this because realism is a big part of the way he writes his comic books. And we thought it would be good to poke fun at the real sections,
Yeah.
i.e. with Paul Giamatti, by making... Oh, no, sorry, the bits with Harvey Pekar, by making them the most comic booky and fakest
Yeah.
environments. These were the real documentary moments, but in a comic book frame.
Yeah.
The film, as you say, it's always... And it's the same with having a scene where they see their courtship when we have just been treated to the quote-unquote real scene
yeah.
of their courtship
Yeah.
is reminding us, the viewers, that, hey, what you just saw wasn't real.
It wasn't. Yes, and when they come out of it, narrator, real Harvey, says, God only knows how I'll feel when I watch this movie.
It's just...
He's like totally admitting that this is all going to be fake stuff.
Great. I just love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So at this point, Joyce, she wants to do more with her life. She becomes very depressed. She can't get out of bed. This is when they get a phone call from Letterman.
Not Letterman personally, but the
producer of Letterman. They want him to come on the show. So at this point, Harvey had inked a book with Doubleday to do a book collection of some of like the best of
American Splendor,
or The Life and Times of Harvey Pekar is what that book was called.
Right.
So I guess they had enough pull to get him invited onto Letterman. Now, here comes another bombshell moment in this movie. They're in the green room getting ready to go out. Harvey's all nervous. He's like, oh, you know, how's this going to go? He's like, is there food? Can I get some food back here? And Joyce is a bit not sure about how this is going to play out. He walks out of the green. They're in the green room watching the screen. On the screen is real David Letterman.
Yeah.
Real clip. He says, okay, now our next guest is from Cleveland. He makes comic books.
He works as he says he's a file clerk in a veterans hospital in Cleveland, but he also makes comic books. And here he is.
And then Paul Giamatti walks out of the green room, and then Harvey Pekar, 85, walks on screen, and we see the actual clip from Letterman. And it's like this bizarre... At this point, we're an hour into the movie, and you know these things are getting shuffled around and shifted, like reality is shifting in a way that it's not like... It's not jarring, but it's staggering. It's like, what a clever play that was to just show the clip. And it's very interesting because this version of Harvey, the real Harvey on Letterman, is not the real Harvey that we've seen.
No.
He's not that grumpy guy. This is a funny guy that can keep up with Letterman.
Well, he's really going for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we read that comic. The comic that we read about his first appearance on Letterman is great because we get an inner monologue from him where he's stressing about Letterman's going to say and do this. I got to get on the front foot with him. I can't give him any advantages. I just got to go right for him.
Yeah.
And he appears on it, and you know, like Letterman tries to engage him, and he's just like right on him, and he's like, "Where's the Cleveland jokes? You know, when are you going to start making fun of Cleveland?"
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. But he's kind of this...
He's quite combative.
Yes. He's kind of smiling and like a cheery... He's a comedy version of Harvey that we haven't seen. And that's... throughout the movie, we've been saying there's all different versions of Harvey, including the Halloween version in no costume. These are all iterations.
Yes. It's very clever. So, again, we can see the documentary background. Because in a documentary, you will see archival footage.
Yeah.
You will see an interview with the person... you know, whomever in the present. And you might see reproductions starring someone, maybe Paul Giamatti.
Yeah.
But you will always be given, you know, like, but this is a documentary. In a documentary, you'll be given context. You know, there'll be a voiceover or something. It'll be explaining what's context for what we're seeing. Maybe like a subtitle or something like that. Here, though, they've done all those things, and yet there's no context.
Yes. Yeah.
Instead, we're scrambling to keep up with... what's happening.
Think about how many movies you've seen that were based on true stories with actors, and then finally, when the credits roll, you get to see a photo of the real
Then
people.
you get the real person. It's like, remember, this was real. Nudge, nudge, nudge. Here it's the opposite. It's like, remember, this is fake.
Yeah.
Except this bit's real.
But even then,
Letterman.
it's Harvey's personality on Letterman is some sort of put on or something. There's more to it. It's
I mean, it sounds like just an exercise in what, like, fucking with the audience. But... but it's people, like, it captures something of the spirit of the comics with this approach.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Pekar himself has gone on record as saying this, that he said in more than one play he wasn't 100% happy with the film, but he certainly felt that it had captured the spirit of his work.
Right.
What did he say? I thought they did... This is an interview he gave in about 2003. I thought they did a pretty good job of capturing the feeling of the work. But it's not exactly 100% me. Then they asked him, so what are the differences? And then Joyce said, in real life, we don't say witty things every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And Hope Davis has cheekbones.
Yeah. That's pretty accurate summary, I'd say. Okay, so he's on Letterman. We get a montage of all the appearances on Letterman. Meanwhile, Toby has become famous on MTV.
Yeah, we see that too.
We see him filming some segments for MTV. By the way...
And promoting White Castle.
Promoting White Castle. Here's a deep cut.
Oh, good. Another one. Is Alan Moore involved again?
No. So Pekar arrives on the MTV set where Toby is filming his segment. And he steps on a, I think it's one of the light reflector.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Tears it. The director is this diva-looking guy.
Yep.
In outrageous clothes with this big, bangs hanging down over half his face.
Yep.
He looks like he's from Flock of Seagulls or something. Right?
Yes, exactly.
And he's like, what the fuck are you doing, man? What are you doing on my set? Get out of here. Who is this guy? Get this guy the fuck out of here. That actor is Eben Moss Bacharach. Do you know who that is?
I don't.
Okay. He was on Girls. He was on The Bear. But that's not relevant. Relevant to this conversation is he was Microchip on the Punisher TV series.
Oh.
On Netflix. And he is playing the Thing in Fantastic Four, in the MCU Fantastic Four coming out next year.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. And I only noticed that because I was watching the credits and I saw his name come up as MTV director. I was like, what? And then I went back and looked and I was like, oh yeah, that's him.
Well done.
Oh, and by the way, the guy who played Pekar on stage, Donald Logue,
Yes.
is in Ghost Rider, and he played Harvey Bullock on Gotham for 5 seasons or whatever.
I hovered over his Wikipedia page, but it didn't get to his Ghost Rider credit. Yeah. So I just kept on scrolling.
I was like, weird. He was this really buff guy. He was so miscast as Harvey Pekar.
Yeah.
But it was like deliberately.
Yeah,
like,
because
try to get a guy
to heighten the unreality.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Well, while we're on the subject of people appearing in other stuff, what did you have for Paul Giamatti?
Okay, so
let's get into it now. Yeah.
He's in El Super Bisto, which is a Rob Zombie cartoon based on a Rob Zombie comic book.
Amazing.
He's a voice in that.
Okay.
He is in Spider-Man 2 as the Rhino.
Yeah, I got that one, yeah.
So that once we get those 2, he'll be up to 3.
Yep.
He's also a voice in an Asterix cartoon as Asterix.
I saw that, yeah. Are we going to do any Asterix cartoons?
We're going to do the live-action ones.
Here's one. Did you have him as the voice of the amazing Screw-On Head?
No, and I forgot. I knew that, and I forgot all about it.
In an unaired, unproduced pilot from 2006?
Well, it was... I think it exists. I think it was produced...
it was unaired pilot, not unproduced. Yeah, I mean, how could he be the voice if it wasn't produced?
Yes.
So the show wasn't produced.
Yeah.
Right. So an unaired pilot.
Yes.
So that's
I forgot about that.
Mike Mignola.
Good catch. I forgot about that one.
And it's technically not within the scope of the podcast, but Hope Davis played Maria Stark, Tony Stark's mum, in Civil War.
Oh. I forgot about that. Okay.
There we go. A point each.
Okay. All right, so Joyce decides she needs to do something with her life. She's going to go after... She's unhappy with the Letterman situation.
Yep.
Because Harvey's being treated as a clown. He's just there to be the butt of jokes, to be attacked by Letterman. It's really interesting reading Letterman's thoughts about it now.
Well, yeah, I've read that. I've read those too. Like after he passed away, like they asked him for comments, and he just said how much he respected.
He said he would have had. He said if he was doing it now, he would have Harvey on every night.
Every night. Yeah. I think we hear what the writers have done, and it's not bad. Is that this is part of the narrative?
Yeah.
We're getting to the third act kind of challenge, or the mid-story challenge, and here the challenge is Joyce is leaving.
She's going to help kids in Jerusalem.
Yep. Him and Toby are figures of fun being taken advantage of by the mainstream media, and he's about to discover that he has testicular cancer.
The night she flies out he finds a lump.
Yeah. This apparently is true again. Well, if we can believe the voiceover from real Harvey, this is true. Now, I think I've read Harvey Pekar doesn't seem to have thought of himself as a victim or the butt of Letterman's jokes. His issues with appearing on Letterman seem to have been something different, more to do with politics, which is, I think, what spurred him to confront him in that. Eventually, in that it feels like the final appearance, but it wasn't actually, because he appeared twice more. But the one where he confronted him about the sponsor for
the owner, GE owned NBC, and GE was manufacturing weapons.
Yes, so he confronted him and needled Letterman about that, and Letterman lost his cool, and they shouted at one another and all this stuff, and then. They aired the episode.
Yes.
Which, again, you know, if you think Letterman didn't like Pekar, you're wrong, because he at least respected him because they put out the episode afterwards. People saw it.
Yeah.
NBC later then put the kibosh on it and wouldn't even release the footage for the film. But then they had him back twice more in the early 90s.
Yeah. But there was a 4 or 5 year gap there.
Yes, there was. There certainly
he was suspended.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. But
so
you think it probably came from above Letterman's head is the impression I get.
Well, I have a tidbit about that.
Great.
So when he comes out, so Joyce has gone to Jerusalem. He discovers he's got cancer. So shit's hitting the fan, right?
Yeah.
For him. And then he's got to go on Letterman by himself. Yeah. Although I think Joyce might have been back. But she makes a point on the commentary that when he came out to do that last show where he had that outburst and accused NBC is owned by GE, they're making weapons, you're hypocrites, etc., etc. He kept on wearing the shirt that says... on strike from... There was a strike happening at NBC at that time. And apparently backstage, Letterman was wearing the same shirt. And then he put his suit on over it.
Oh.
So...
Well,
I mean, that's symbolic, you know.
Indeed. Some real life symbolism there.
Yeah, so, yeah, definitely, like exactly what you're saying. He did respect Harvey and put that on the air. I think he was probably, I mean, they were his bosses. He couldn't agree with him. And he was attacking the audience. So they have to reproduce this sequence for the movie.
Yes.
Very interesting because we see the actor playing Letterman from behind. We barely see Harvey because we're behind the set of the city.
Yeah.
We're kind of looking at the audience, which is not the way you watch it on TV, where you don't see the shock of the audience. It's really an interesting flip of perspective, like...
And art from adversity, because they planned to just use the footage. Yeah. But then it wasn't working. So then they came up with this compromise, which ultimately... As you point out, works better.
It's very interesting because I feel like this actor does not do a great David Letterman impression, but it doesn't matter because we've already seen real Dave in the movie, and we've been told that there's real versions and actor versions of everything. So
I'm not even sure that actor is the one that we're seeing as Letterman from behind. I don't think it's even the same person that's doing the voice.
Yeah, that's right. I agree. Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now we get our cancer here. Joyce comes back. They find out about the cancer. He gets the diagnosis. He's got to go through chemo, all of that. She wants to make a comic about it as a way of coping with the process.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to do it. He can't handle it. Apparently this is very accurate to the way it played out. So she brings in an artist named Fred. In reality, it was Frank Stack. There's a bit of fudging here, deliberately on the part of Pekar and Brabner because they wanted to protect certain identities of people involved in this part of the story.
Sure.
So this guy, Fred, comes in. He's got a 9-year-old daughter, Danielle. Danielle's mom is a bit of a mess. She's not in the picture, or she's causing problems. I'm not sure. So he's actually had to bring her over to this meeting with Joyce to talk about the comic and stuff, which he thinks is awkward.
Yeah.
He's apologetic. But actually, Joyce and Danielle get along.
Well, we've established that Joyce wants kids.
Yes, that's right.
A couple of times in some earlier scenes, and Harvey doesn't. Clearly, because he's had a vasectomy. She sort of brings up adoption, I think, maybe of war orphans or something.
Yes, that's right. She does consider
and
that,
he just absolutely shuts it down.
Yeah.
But we have this moment here where he sees how Joyce interacting with Danielle, and the artist said, I could come next Tuesday to talk about the book with you, but I'm probably going to have to bring Danielle again.
Or he's actually trying to get out of it.
Yeah, he's trying to... Well, he doesn't...
And Harvey's like, well, bring the kid.
Bring her. He says, you can, come, but you have to bring Danielle. You can come if you bring Danielle. And he's taken aback.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah. So we get the cancer treatment. intercut with panels from the comic, which we had a lot of that early in the movie, especially when he's talking to Mr. Boats.
Yeah.
It would cut from the conversation in the hallway to panels from the comic. We haven't talked about that much, but that happened earlier. Now it comes back, especially during Cancer. It's almost like...
It's a montage,
It's a montage, and it's actually...
The film's getting a little long at this point.
Quite interesting, because Paul Giamatti, I'm getting confused.
Yeah.
Paul can't lose 50 pounds in a day to shoot the shower scene, right? He's got a scene in the shower where his hair's falling out.
Yeah.
The comics panels are kind of substitute.
Yeah, I think it's fun.
They're like, we see some of his, he has tantrums, sometimes during treatment, he's frustrated.
Yeah.
But we only get the comics of that. We don't really see the...
We don't see Paul Giamatti wigging out and trashing a hospital room.
No.
Yeah, probably saved a bit of money.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is when we get the scene I mentioned much earlier about he wakes up in the middle of the night and he says, am I a guy who writes comics or am I a character in a comic book? And he collapses.
What happens when I die? Will the comic just fade away?
Yeah.
Will my character fade away? And then he collapses. Yeah.
Yes.
And then we get who is Harvey Pekar.
This sequence is all done in one shot of it's Paul Giamatti standing in a white space.
Just like the comic.
And he says, who is Harvey Pekar? Which has been a question throughout the movie, back to the Halloween sequence at the beginning. It's been the theme of the movie. He says, who's Harvey Pekar? And he tells us a story about finding the other Harveys in the phone book and hearing about their death and then the other one turning up later. And he's walking through this white space and there's kind of lines being drawn in for corners live, like a Warner Brothers cartoon where the artist is drawing in the lines. Lines are appearing, environments are appearing. He appears in front of the hospital. A ghostly figure of the real Harvey walks behind him at one stage as he's trying to figure out who he really is. And he's talking directly to camera, which is to the audience, which Paul Giamatti Harvey has not done until this point, right? Previously, it's always been real Harvey doing this. So I think it's very clever that that's like one of the earliest American Splendor comics. But they've spliced it into like the climactic...
the climax, yeah. Sure,
the real identity crisis moment of the movie. They put it right after that collapse. And then basically he gets the call from the doctor that he's got the all clear.
Yeah. They've since adopted Danielle, the girl.
Yeah.
She gives him a hug.
Yep.
And then we get
the retirement.
Possibly the real life retirement, or possibly staged. Probably staged.
It's real.
It's real?
I believe so.
The real life retirement party for the real Harvey Pekar, presumably in the Veterans Hospital where he worked all his life.
Yeah.
Among the files, still not digitized.
Yeah.
Cutting the cake. Toby's there.
Yeah.
The real Joyce Brabner's there. The real Danielle, his stepdaughter, his foster daughter rather, is there. Yeah, it's a nice moment.
Yes, they have a group hug, like a family hug, the three of them.
Yeah.
And he just talks about, maybe it was a little bit before this, he drops her off at school, or take the bus to school, and there's a great moment where Giamatti's walking towards camera, and then it like snaps to real Harvey walking towards camera, which is a bit parallels the Halloween scene where we had the kid walking up the street, which snapped to Giamatti in the same shot. He's wearing the same clothes. He was actually wearing Harvey's clothes.
Yeah, that's astonishing.
It's crazy. But he has a little bit of a moment there where he talks about the small victories. And so it ends with the retirement party and the family hug, and that's kind of that's the finale. I did want to mention that there are some Cheap Suit Serenaders songs on the soundtrack, which is Robert Crumb's band.
Oh, okay.
And we also had some Cheap Suit Serenaders on Ghost World, I believe. So we've had Crumb 3 times in some form.
Wow. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And probably
four
again.
if we count Fritz. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I did want to mention, I have the DVD because I did buy this when it came out. I just want to mention about the commentary because I watched it with the commentary today. This is one of the most chaotic movie commentaries I've ever heard in my life. Everybody's...
So who's on it exactly?
Okay. The 2 directors,
right?
Paul Giamatti.
Yep.
Judah Friedlander comes in an hour late. He was stuck in like traffic, but he shows up. Harvey, Joyce, and Danielle.
Wow.
So there's 7 people. There's just random conversation about jelly bean talk. Every time they talk to Harvey about anything, he's very he just gives one word. They say, Harvey, did you ever have hair like that? And he says, I don't know. Like, that's his normal response to a lot of stuff. That he gets a phone call on his cell phone in the middle of recording, and here's 2003 ringtone go off, goes off like that. He answers the call, and Joyce has to tell him how to shut off his ring. This is all on the commentary track. It's all happening. Yeah, and then Judas shows up an hour late.
Perfect accompaniment to this movie.
It was really pretty wild.
That's great.
Okay, now I guess it's trivia time.
Sure thing. All right. This film cost around $2 million.
Okay.
US to make, $2003, made $8.7 million.
Okay.
So a success, but this is what you would call an indie or art house film. Independent. Well,
premiered at Sundance.
It did.
Right?
Independent. It's an independent movie.
Yeah.
So it's not a major studio movie, but very well regarded, award winning. It's pointless to go into how many awards it won or was nominated for because it's a very long list, but I will say that it won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance where it premiered.
Okay.
And perhaps most relevant to the podcast, it won the Writers Guild of America Award for Best Adapted Screenplay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, duh.
Yeah.
And was also nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars.
Okay.
Nominated but didn't win. Lost to Return of the King.
Oh.
Which is a bit disappointing.
Yeah.
Really. But then that was the 3 years when the Lord of the Rings was sweeping the Oscars. Yes. Yeah. So how did it get made? Okay, well, the film was produced by a guy called Ted Hope.
Yep.
Yes. So, independent film producer, quite a few films. Yep. This is probably his best, most award-winning film that he produced, but he produced a few others. He'd acquired the rights in a funny story. In an interview with Joyce and Harvey, Joyce said, this story is a perfect example of why I take care of business. She said, Harvey was told by a mutual friend that a producer named Ted Hope was very interested in American Splendor. She then cocked her thumb at Harvey. But he's depressed. He figures it'll never work out, so he doesn't bother to call. I find this out a couple of months or even a year later. So I called this guy directly, and we have a deal in 5 minutes. Brilliant. Then
I think I know who the mutual friend is.
Oh.
They mentioned on the commentary track. He was a comics artist, and I can't remember his name now. He used to draw, I think it was Dean Haspiel. Dean Haspiel used to draw some of Harvey's stuff. I might be slightly wrong about this. But there's a scene in the movie where when Harvey first tries to draw stick figure comics, he tries to draw a comic and it comes out of stick figures. He's like, what the hell? And he picks up a comic and flips through it. That's a Dean Haspiel comic. And I believe Dean Haspiel was the guy that connected.
He was the go-between.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. That makes sense.
Okay.
All right, so something of a passion project for Ted Hope. I suppose a fan, one of the people that bought one of the 5,000 copies that are sold every year.
Yeah.
And he approached Berman and Pulcini.
Okay.
Asking them if they wanted to make the film. He provided them with copies of the comics. They read them. They, quote, fell in love, end quote, with the comics. Decided they wanted to make it. And it was shot in around a month.
Okay.
In 2001.
Okay.
End of 2001. Yeah. And that's pretty much it for trivia.
Oh, I did have one bit of trivia. I was talking about the fonts earlier. So they do use the Crumb font in the opening credits, but in the rest of the movie, they use a font called Wild Words.
Okay.
Comic book font. Very common comic book font. Everybody uses it called Wild Words. Wild Words was the font developed for Jim Lee's Wildstorm comics.
Oh.
This is the most opposite.
What? It's the opposite of Harvey Pekar. It's the opposite of American Splendor.
It is the most superhero, extreme 90s.
It's so 90s.
Muscles, pouches, ammo comics. But they developed this font to computer letter those comics. I used it on my own comic. That's the font I used. It's the one everybody's used to looking at. And that's the one you see when it says, like, Harvey has cancer. All those bits. That's in Wild Worlds.
That's
Wild
amazing.
Words. I just wanted to mention that bit.
That is an excellent piece of trivia. Excellent. All right. Votes.
Oh, okay, votes. So, comic. Let's start with comic. So this is a yay for me. It's not for everybody, but I would recommend seeking out like a best of collection. There's a few out there, different ones. I've got a one here, this is probably hard to find, but it's American Splendor presents Bob and Harv comics.
Okay.
And it's just the Crumb collaborations.
Okay.
So it's an all Crumb.
So the ones with the best art.
The best art, yeah. this is the one to get if you can find it. Otherwise, any kind of best of collection. But otherwise, it's a bit hit and miss, as I mentioned before. But definitely, this is not like any other comics.
Right. I think throughout the last hour and a half, my respect for Harvey Pekar as an artist has come through.
Okay.
However, Kumar, I feel like you would be disappointed in me if I didn't vote nay.
Okay. I wouldn't be disappointed. I would be...
Shocked?
I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, my feelings about this kind of comics are well established.
Uh-huh.
I don't like grown-up comics.
Okay. But that's the premise of the podcast. It's half the premise, is half of these movies are going to be based on grown-up comics.
Well... when I say grown-up comics, I don't mean comics for grown-ups. I mean non-genre comics.
Yeah, that's what it's the same...
That's a pretty broad statement, Kumar. I think most of the stuff we do is genre comics. But look, it's not all negative. Let me put it this way. The fact that I don't like these comics very much is good.
Okay.
If all comics were just comics that I wanted to read...
Yeah.
then, as a mode of creative expression, comics will be very limited. And it was, right? For decades.
Yes.
For decades it was just crap for kids.
Yeah.
Talking animals in newspapers. Or edgy shit published in the underground. If comics is a broader medium now in which anything is possible, and like novels, or film, or video games, it is. It's a limitless medium. If it's that way now, it's thanks, at least in part, to Harvey Pekar.
Okay, so what you're saying is
the fact that I
appreciate and respect it, but you don't like it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I tip my hat to Harvey Pekar and his cranky insistence on publishing great stuff that I will never read.
Okay.
Film.
Oh, a huge A for me. I've seen it many times. It still delights me every time. I don't have much more to say about it than what I've said. It's a real surprise, I think. Amazing what they did with so little money and just a lot of heart, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, for me also a big yay. I absolutely loved this movie.
Okay,
loved
good.
it so much.
Yeah.
The second half is a little long, but the first half especially is just bombshell after bombshell.
Yeah, in terms of storytelling,
incredible
narrative,
sequence. I love its ambition. I've never seen another film like it.
Yeah.
It's so ambitious.
But it's interesting that you find because that back half is kind of the celebrity, the Letterman, that kind of stuff, and then the cancer stuff.
Yeah.
So you're more interested in the American Splendor side of it.
Well, it's for me, the medium is the message.
Yes, right. The medium, yes.
This film, this is something only film can do. Only in film, we can hear the real Harvey Pekar's live voice while looking at an actor playing him.
Yes. Yes.
And, the panel sequences. The smash cut to...
And to have him thinking in comics was... Yeah,
the thinking in comics, the smash cut to a behind the scene that isn't a behind the scene, but is in fact just another scene.
Yes. Yes.
And it's obvious it's just another scene because they filmed it against a pure white background like a fake comic book. You couldn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
In any other... It's so clever, and it's just... They've really pushed...
Yes, it's ingenious.
I really think that as a film, it's really remarkable. So yay for me, definitely.
Okay. Adaptation, as I said at the start, I don't think we're going to top it. I think, so far, Sin City's probably number 2 in terms of adaptation of, holy cow, they found some radical approach to solve, the solution to how do we adapt this material.
Yeah.
And especially with American Splendor, where the message of the material is also a very strange thing. These just slices of life, as they call that genre, which I don't really quite like that term, but
no, I haven't used it. You notice?
Yes.
I don't think it applies.
But it is something. It's like little tidbits of life or something like that, and to say, hey, let's make a movie out of this, and then I would be like, you can't. And then they've somehow put this amazing thing together. It almost reminded me of, if you've ever seen The French Lieutenant's Woman, or Tristram Shandy, A Cock and Bull Story, or Adaptation, which were all 3 movies, which were supposed to be adaptations of Tristram Shandy or French Lieutenant's Woman, and they couldn't do it, so they actually made a movie about people trying to make a movie adapting those things, and this is almost in that ballpark where it's like, well, how are we going to make a movie about this comic book? We can't. We can make a movie about making the comic book.
Except they don't. Except they haven't. Except they. Yes, I completely agree. Except they haven't gone that extra step. They never. We don't see the directors.
No, that's right. We hear them. We hear them do interview bits. Yes.
Yeah, but you know, like they haven't. It's not like the Woman in Black that we saw. This isn't going to make any sense to people listening, but Kumar and I saw The Woman in Black in the theatre a few weeks ago, and the conceit is
the stage performance,
yeah. And the conceit is that we're watching a stage performance of a stage performance about a ghost story, and that's how you tell a ghost story on the stage, by making it about adapting a ghost story for the stage. It's very metatextual. I feel like this film hasn't fallen into that trap. It's still very much a narrative, but it's included so many cheeky hints and kind of like fun asides. None of it's really what you would call... Well, it seems like it's fourth wall breaking, but ultimately it's all still within the fourth wall. So because of those sequences which look like they're breaking the fourth wall are on those...
Yes, the only one is when
it does
Giamatti says, "Who is Harvey Pekar?" at the end. That sequence, that white space sequence.
They've never. It's not that self-aware. It's not telling us. It's not giving us a wink and a nudge. Oh, look how self-aware we are, and therefore you are. No. It makes us work for it.
Yeah.
With like those bombshells.
Yeah.
Like where it drops that stuff on it, like where we cut away and there's the real Toby having a conversation about jelly beans. We don't have a voiceover saying, "Here's the real Toby."
Yes.
We had to capture his essence in order for this adaptation to work. I think, frankly, I think this is genius.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think it would work with any other. If adapting, I don't think there are many. I don't think you could make this film twice, because
Yeah.
it's so ambitious, yet it's also so true.
Yeah.
To the material.
Yes.
Which is it's a big tick for you, Kumar. It takes few liberties with the source material, because so much of what we see is straight out of the comics.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, they took what was a very deconstructed comic with nothing to tie them together chronologically or narratively, and they've welded it into a traditional story.
Yeah.
You know, with a 3-act structure.
Yeah.
With the peaks and the troughs and the resolution. So it's transformative. There's transformation as well as accuracy. And, you know, last of all, they're just rubbing our face in it constantly.
Yeah.
We just see the comic everywhere.
Yes. Yeah, they keep putting panels on screen. Yeah.
I think it's genius.
Yeah.
A full-throated yay for me.
Yeah. Okay, so please like, rate, review, subscribe. Please join us on Facebook for the links and memes. Please join us on Instagram for the reels. It's a bit inactive at the moment, but it will be active again.
Brilliant.
Please email us on the email address listed in the show notes, which is, I can't even remember the email address, just check the
show notes.
Or DM us on Instagram, or even on Twitter. I am on there. You'll have to do a bit of searching for me, or it's in the show notes, I believe. Join our Patreon, please, because we could use the dough.
Yep.
I did buy this DVD 20 years ago.
Yeah, with inflation, that's really expensive, so we need...
You know, for the hosting fees and the books and DVDs as they come up. I think that's all the sales stuff. Okay, next week we will be doing Peanuts, which I think from about 5 or 6 years ago.
Feels very recent.
It is pretty
I feel like
recent.
it kind of like came and went.
I saw it at the cinema. Took my kid to see it.
Yes,
at the time he was the right age, and
you also own copies of American Splendor. So.
Yes. I think I did plan for Peanuts to come after American Splendor, because I do believe it swipes a few tricks from it.
Wow, then I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.